Thank you all for being here today. I just wanted to start by saying that in the wake of the tragedy unfolding right now today in Boston, I feel especially honored and especially humbled to be here today to introduce these two extraordinary pioneering feminist scholars. Their work is a true positive force in the world, and I'm excited to be here. I'm just going to introduce you both at the same time.
Okay.
Disha Mullick is an activist and journalist who has done amazing work for 7 years, training and supporting women from marginalized communities in northern India as reporters and editors who go on to run their own newspapers. Women from Khabar, Lahariya, a rural feminist media collective, produce, write, edit, photograph, and design their newspaper, and then distribute it to 80,000 readers in 700 villages. The newspaper was first conceptualized by a Delhi-based NGO called Nirantar. In her talk, A Change is Gonna Come, Disha shares some of the experiences of these rural women journalists and explores how access to information and new media technology has, or has not, informed the specific situated voices of these journalists, as well as the ways reporters represent themselves and their world using such technology. Eve Ng's research focuses on television and new media, cultural production, class, taste, distinction, and queer representation. Eve is currently, along with Disha, a research associate at the Five College Women's Studies Research Center. Last year, she completed her dissertation in the Department of Communication, as well as a graduate certificate in Advanced Feminist Studies in the Department of Women, Gender, Sexuality Studies at UMass. And this fall, she will join Ohio University, and I quote Eve, "Yay!"
I was meant to read that part.
as an assistant professor in Women and Gender Studies and Media Arts and Studies. Eve is one of the few pioneering researchers to analyze how digital technologies facilitate the production of LGBT media outside of the global north, and how the circulation of LGBT text globally is informing the production of queer communities and identities in culturally and geographically specific spaces. Today, Eve will talk about her current project, looking at LGBT websites outside of the US to address issues of new media and participation, commercialization, and the goal of decentering the West in digital media studies and in queer studies. Please join me in welcoming our speakers.
That kind of introduces what I do, I think, better than I could in any words. I'm Disha. I work with an NGO in Delhi called Nirantar. And Nirantar works on gender and education and has been working on adult women's education for about 20 years. And the project that I work on, Khabar, Lahariya, emerged from work on women's literacy, adult women's literacy, around 10 years ago. I'm here as a research associate at the Five College Women's Studies Research Center at a point in Khabar Lahariya's life where we are expanding. We have been expanding for the past 2 years, and we're working towards setting up the organization as a separate media organization. So the time was kind of to step back from a very intensive, kind of hectic strategizing and visioning for the growth of Khabar Lahariya and thinking about what it means to be a feminist collective, and also to think about how using media in Khabar Lahariya is radical, it's feminist, it's transformative, how it affects all our journeys as women journalists from different social locations, how it affects us or enables us to become persons, to become political identities, feminists in a digital age. And also to think about whether Khabar Lahariya can bring multiple situated knowledges into contemporary feminist discourse. So what should be clear by now is that I've prepared a kind of a mishmash of multimedia to kind of tell you what I think. And one of the reasons why it's kind of a mishmash is that I feel uncomfortable. I mean, Khabar Lahariya is a collective, and generally the experiences and thoughts that we present are the collectives. And so I felt kind of uncomfortable being so far away and stepping so far back when what I was presenting is really the experience of 10 years of traversing different kinds of media and different parallel journeys of different women. So what I'm trying to present is a tapestry of sorts of a collective experience of feminist media work, and coming to understand what it means for me. So I'm very much present in the narrative, but also what it means parallelly for the rural, Dalit, Adivasi Muslim women that I work with. And I just wanted to say, because will use this word a lot through the presentation, but we work predominantly with women from marginalized communities and predominantly Dalit women. And Dalit women are the women who are at the bottom of the caste hierarchy in India. They're untouchables, so they're outside of the caste structure. So I'm going to start with a piece of writing that I did a little while ago and that I've been adapting while I've been here, and it's kind of difficult, but I'll try and break it up and tell you what I'm saying and who's speaking. It's multiple voices, I think, about grappling with different kinds of media in the last 5 years. This is an imaginary story of a woman in a village. I was traveling in a train once. I was sitting on my berth. The window next to me was open and cool breeze was coming in through it. It seemed like the trees and shrubs were running past us. The mountains and waterfalls were walking with us. I was absorbing the scene when my gaze fell upon the seat in front of me. She was sitting there, lost in her thoughts, as if she were lifeless. I stared at her for a long time. Then I broke my silence and began the conversation with a laugh. This is me now. I've been so thirsty for so long for stories and pictures of movements and women that worked and wrote and shouted and blocked and occupied and decided to step outside before me and lead me to being where I am. Up all night on trains that snake through barren terrain, now cracked, now green, now yellow, listening to tales of other friends and sisters, some that turned bitter, some lost along the way, reading about them, writing about them, slipping through yellow transparencies to see familiar faces, familiar spaces, finding my place in the past, finding a collective that I was part of, obscured in the mystery of oral histories passed down. I never really thought about the images and stories I was living, the friends and colleagues that slipped into my life, their own experiments with form and medium, making possible revisions of themselves, becoming bits and pieces of my kaleidoscopic vision of the world, changing its colors, making them richer, darker. I couldn't imagine not being feminist. I couldn't imagine not being acutely aware of my gender, my normativity, my non-normativity, my class, my educational privileges, my language, my discomfort with being in the position of trainer just because I got off the train from Delhi. Being called Didi for the first time by a woman my own age, but married for 12 years, neglected, separated, a well-known Dalit journalist, now leading her own media collective. I couldn't imagine a self not engaged in resisting in some tiny, relentless way, in imaginations of new worlds. My feminist awareness of power lurking in every observation, training, conversation, pinched me relentlessly, so that my relationship with feminism was, in a word, uncomfortable. Fit into the long journeys, the pedagogies and possibilities of empowerment, the production and contestation of a public space and voice that my rural, Dalit, tribal, Muslim women colleagues and friends had negotiated over years. This is Kavita, one of the editors of Khabar Lahariya. The courage I have is from Khabar Lahariya. I went for trainings, I learned about my rights, I reported, I talked to people in villages, I traveled in big cities, Delhi, Bombay, learned from others' experiences. I saw the world outside, I earned my own money. I had computer, video, photography trainings, which I loved. I never dreamt I would be able to use a computer. When we used to do production, I would be so scared of the computer. But I've learned now. I've learned to SMS even. I can do it on my own. I'm able to make my own personal decisions. I decided to leave my family. Many people say that I'm a bad woman, but I tell them that I'm doing what's good for me. This is me. A year passed. More maybe. My feminist pedagogy, worn down by self-consciousness, stretched itself to accommodate new technologies of communication. The murky fact of the digital divide, the pleasure and the danger innate in each grip on the mouse, each page typed, email sent out, accessing desired people and places, each portrait or photo story or film that recreated or reshaped their very immediate worlds and relationships, reshaped the way the world saw them. Each posting on the blog that registered that they were there, in that bus, listening to that conversation, reacting to it, voicing that reaction in a sphere distinct to the very local one they moved and worked within. Being part of sparking that thrill, the capability, the exploration of a new space for knowledge production. Experiencing a very different role as trainer, with the power to show how technology worked but not what it could produce. Being surprised by this rapid proliferation of new selves and stories and articulations of feminism layered in with the old. The very electric overlap between virtual and real, urban and rural, privileged and marginalized, traditional and new forms of storytelling. This is how I found my feet within feminism. Democracy can be broken down into little bits. New languages, words, syntax, grammar, semantics, took form, bending and twisting existing practices of communication between us. Indeed, new ways of talking within the new network society began to be inscribed on old relationships of power, necessarily changing them, recasting them. New ways of determining who is looking, who is looked at, possibilities and challenges of new compositions emerged. This is Meera, another one of the editors of Khabar Lahariya. The computer is a very big thing, but even bigger than that is the internet. If I say it in simple language, I think the internet is like an ocean. Just like there are so many things in the ocean and there is no end to it. There's sand and shells and pebbles and animals and plants. Just like that, even the internet has so many kinds of information. This is Ruxana. She's one of the women who we trained in our first new media training. The best thing about using the computer is typing. When I type, I feel like it's just for me. No one else can see it. You understand? What I want to send to whoever, it will only go to that person. And no one in between can see it. This is why I like it. If you want to keep something from someone, you can do it this way. And will not be only from villages and small towns, but cities and metros, or even readers from other countries who can read Hindi. Khabar Lahariya reports on news that is out of reach for mainstream papers, or shall we say mainstream papers don't want to cover them. So in this context, these reports will reach beyond the district to the state and even beyond to the central administration through the website. Till now, it's only news from mainstream papers that you find on the internet. It's important for people to really see, given the internet is more or less the only place people are seeing things these days, what being a rural newspaper is really all about. There's something in KL for everyone. The interested urban audience, language speakers who are away from where languages are spoken, people who are working in rural India on governance or literacy, and all of these people need to know about KL. What better place than the internet? We still have to work on making content available in the more popular languages. Other than that, finally, Khabar Lahariya's large body of work gets a place on the internet where things never die and are a click away. This is the coolest, most sound way of documenting an unbelievably interesting past, a pacey present, and the journey ahead. This is me. Still, questions of who is inviting whom into the new spaces of knowledge production and what actually happened to the new knowledge or identities created through new media, what currency they held within the terms of the local context and structures of our feminism remain. How do these new pedagogies of resistance, of understanding and framing the world and ourselves within it, expand the spaces that we inhabit, enable our ownership of them, make possible a sense of citizenship, of selfhood? So, in case that completely, eclipsed what Khabar Lahariya is, I just have a few more nitty-gritty kind of slides on what we do. Newspaper that's brought out from 7 rural districts of Uttar Pradesh, which is a state in North India. It's brought out by collectives of rural women in each of those districts. So each of the editions of Khabar Lahariya is brought out by a team of between 7 and 10 rural women who are Dalit or tribal Adivasi. Many of them never went to school or dropped out of school in the 5th standard or in the 8th standard, or they continue their education after they start working. Many of them are also high school and college graduates. And like I said, Khabar Lahariya started off as a project to sustain literacy and around the objective of having literacy material and printed matter that was created by local communities for themselves, but also moved more into the realm of bringing women to the public sphere as opinion makers and challenging stereotypes of what kinds of work that women can do. The first edition was launched in 2002, and then 2006 was the next edition, but over the last 2 years we've expanded quite quickly. So that's Uttar Pradesh on the map of India, and where we started was this corner of Uttar Pradesh, which is Bundelkhand. This area is Bundelkhand, and Bundelkhand is very, very underdeveloped part of India. It has very poor development indicators, very low literacy rates for men and women, but especially for women. Very poor sex ratio. Development schemes are very poorly implemented. It's a drought-prone area. People are very poor, and it has a very entrenched feudal caste system, and so the kinds of violence are multiple and very intersectional. So it's a difficult place for most poor people, but for women from marginalized communities, it's particularly oppressive. So just a little bit about how we work. The core of Khabar Lahariya is to establish women from marginalized communities as journalists. So that's the most important component of Khabar Lahariya. The women do the reporting, production, and manage the printing of Khabar Lahariya entirely autonomously. with support from Nirantar. We mentor them, we train them, we support them in various ways, but the editions are managed entirely at the local level. The women also sell the newspaper for 2 rupees a copy. So it's distributed in remote rural communities which don't access any other kind of media. And because it's the only newspaper and the only media that covers the stories that it covers, it tends to have a very immediate impact on local communities. And of course the journeys of the women themselves are quite transformative in the sense that they are poor and often non-literate women who emerge as very confident and established journalists. This is what the newspaper looks like. What it looks like now, this is what it used to look like, but the attempt is to make it more like a mainstream newspaper, so it doesn't get seen as a women's newsletter or a broadsheet, but established as media in its own right. This is the online edition of Khabar, which was just launched last month. It just went live last month. And so now we upload news from all 7 editions of Khabar to this site. Right now it's in Hindi and in the local language because we're only able to manage translations from 7 languages into Hindi and not into English. But we'll have a sister site which is about Khabar Lahariya, the project, which will be available in Hindi and in English. And with bios of the journalists and the kind of work they do and things like that. This is my inbox, and you can't see it very well, but I, in trying to put together the story of where Khabar has moved across in the last 5 years in terms of using new technologies, and when I say new technologies, I think what's important to understand is the journeys of rural and non-literate Dalit women into the sphere of print media or old media itself is a long journey. And so making the move into new media and kind of negotiating this kind of jungle has been a really exciting and very challenging experience. And I think that issues of access and resources are in the framing of this issue, but it's also been really interesting to see how women finding their feet on the internet and then also making it, I selected some emails which I also can't really see, but they kind of map a journey of just the comfort with the technology and getting over the fear of the technology into using the technology for their work. And for example, I don't know if you remember, but Kavita says how she feels so scared when the computer is used during production. And conventionally, we always have a male DTP person who lays out the paper, so the women do all the reporting and then the technical work is done by a man. And we would always be so angry with him because he was so kind of full of himself, like his male space just filled up the entire production room. So a lot of the coming into new skills of technology and being able to handle the computer was that so that we could kind of marginalize this, and then finally we sacked him 3 years ago and we do all the layout on their own. So so many of these emails are the page maker or the design files of the newspaper that they send us to Delhi, and then we send them feedback over the email, and so conversations around content, about form, about issues, about politics happen over email, over Skype. And I think that what the point is that it's changed the way that we communicate, it's also changed the relationships that we have with the women in the field, and I think that it's just reset, and we can talk about this later, it's reset the dynamics between the urban feminists who support and mentor and the rural women journalists who are reporting in the field. So, how am I doing on time?
10 minutes.
Okay, so just, at the end of what I wanted to say is that, I wanted to go into issues that Khabar Lahariya reports on, and I think that a lot of what I've been trying to say is that Khabar Lahariya is a feminist media intervention in both how we work as well as what we do, what we report on, and it's a challenges structures of power and the status quo, and in the context of bringing in women from the margins to do news reporting and to be journalists, that means a lot of time and energy going into building those women, into supporting them, not just giving them one training to do writing and reporting and interviewing and photography, but in fact on a day-to-day basis, building them, increasing their confidence, boosting their levels of information, and that is an everyday and a very intensive process, and which I think contributes to building Khabar Lahariya as a feminist media intervention. And I think that a lot of the time when we present about Khabar Lahariya, what people ask us about is what the impact is in terms of on the community, the impact of the news reports and the impact on the women journalists. And the whole part of building women and making and enabling women to work in very oppressive situations and go out and resist those oppressive circumstances every day of their lives, resist husbands and fathers-in-law and neighbors who will talk about what they do and about their mobility and raise questions about it. That's a very intensive process that's often invisible in the whole positioning of Khabar Lahariya. So it's a high investment in terms of energy and time, and that's something that you have to think about when you talk about community media interventions. They do require a lot of investment. So I just wanted to finish with a couple of examples from Khabar Lahariya's reporting and what makes Khabar Lahariya's reporting distinct. And I want to kind of just go through them quickly and then leave them for you to chew on, and maybe we can discuss them in the questions. So I think that they're examples of the kind of situated knowledge that's distinctive of Khabar Lahariya, of writing from the margins and leveling a critique on structures of oppression. I also think they have the potential to interrogate mainstream discourse around poverty, violence, marginalization, development, democracy, selfhood. But what I want to ask is how specific and local narratives like this can impact more contemporary political understandings around these issues, or even feminist understandings around these issues. Like how does the local, especially in the context of Khabar Lahariya having a website now and those stories being able to be connected with transnational issues about food security and food sovereignty, about climate change, about agriculture, what kind of impact can we talk about in this particular context? So the first example is, this is one of my favorite stories from Khabar Lahariya. It's from a special issue on drought that we produced in 2006. It raises questions about what a women's issue is, because a lot of the critique that Khabar Lahariya gets is that it only writes about women's issues. So what is drought a women's issue? And I think that it also talks about, it also centers the materiality of a certain kind of labor and a certain community it brings that into the domain of the media, which is, this is not a kind of story that you would see in the mainstream paper. This is a more recent example of a story that we did on the recent rape case. So I don't know, is everybody kind of familiar with the rape case that happened? So Khabar Lahariya covered a series of, we did a series of reports on the rape case from the perspective of being a rural newspaper and run by women from the margins and women, a newspaper that covers issues of violence on a day-to-day basis. So we did stories with factual information on the case. At the same time, important issues raised were also debated. Debates around gender neutrality and specificity of the victim and perpetrator, marital rape, capital punishment, because a lot of the mainstream media coverage, which was really hysteric, was around stringent punishment for the rapist, and so a feminist perspective on that, and why we didn't think that only stringent punishment was going to change the structures which make violence happen. So this was one of a series of news reports. So I'll finish there. I just wanted to leave you with these are just some images that a new batch of Khabar reporters shot last year when they did a photo essay in the build-up to Ramzan in Lucknow last year, and so there was just some, you can't really see them now, but I just wanted to say something about using the camera and Muslim women using cameras in the street in Lucknow and refamiliarizing themselves with their spaces. And I just think that the images have just an intimacy and an honesty and an ability to bear witness in a way that is very distinctive to this group of women journalists. Yeah. Thank you.